really like this. Again, it related back to unrelated incidents. It's that whole being judged on certain things about how you look instead of somebody getting to know you. As unrelated incidents talks about how you're judged on the way you speak, Half-Caste talks about how you're judged on the way you look. I like the fact that at the end of the day, people shouldn't be judged on the way they look. It's irrelevant where their background is. You should get to know somebody. And he's saying, if you look at the first 3 lines on the first stanza, excuse me, I'm standing on one leg because I'm half-caste. What's that all about? Does it mean that somebody being half-caste, they're half a person? And that's what John Agard is trying to make a point of. And it's that whole split down the middle, am I 2 different people? Rubbish.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that other poets in the collection seem to be struggling for a sense of identity because they have this mixed heritage. Whereas he seems very comfortable with it, almost, and I think what's particularly telling at the end of the poem is when he says, and I will tell you the other half of my story, the idea that actually I've written this poem that addresses the problem that I have with you calling me half-caste and just looking at the colour of my skin, but actually there's a whole other side to me that we haven't even touched on because of your sort of inability or because you can't see beyond my colour.
Yeah, you can't look past that and get to know the me that's there, the real person. Like with the accent thing and the way we speak, get past that, get to know the person, and you probably find quite an interesting world, especially with these 2 poets. They're very, very good.
Right, so in Half-Caste, I think probably the most obvious point to mention about the language is the use of direct address. All the way through, the explain yourself, demanding to know why we are using this word. And all the time it is addressed to us, you know, so in the second stanza, you know, explain yourself is repeated, and then he's questioning what do you mean. And then through the next stanza, talking about, you know, I'm introduced to you, but then you become, you know, you need to come back tomorrow with the whole of your eye and the whole of your ear. This idea that actually, I'm not the incomplete person, it's you, the reader, and you know, this is what I want you to think about it. Yeah,
I like the way that he uses his imagery in the Half-Caste weather. In the Picasso, my particular favourite is the piano with the ebony and ivory keys. Does it make half a symphony? You know?
Exactly, you need the white
both.
Keys and the black keys, it's
you
essential.
Need both. Yeah, otherwise it doesn't work.
I mean, I particularly like the image of the weather, you know, and when he makes fun of England because of the weather, because it is always overcast, and you know, he comes from this Caribbean background, where of course the weather is always perfect, and yet we judge him for that background, and I think there's a real irony there that I particularly enjoy in the poem.
Yeah, yeah. The moving away from the irony and the imagery and that kind of thing, I like to come back to the language in regards to the actual dialect that it puts in, like in O Dem Cloud. It's almost like taken from the Creole of the Caribbean, but at the same time keeping it to a point where we can understand it.
And then in line 22 has got the "ras," that sort of just that very typical kind of exclamation of annoyance, really.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about the spelling within the poem? What do you think he's trying to achieve there?
Again, it's our dialect, isn't it? It's trying to get you to understand where this man is, where, you know, who he is, to see beyond a colour. You know, like Tom Leonard's trying to see beyond an accent, John Agard is trying to see beyond a colour. He's saying, hey, there's a lot more to it. Don't be so stupid. Don't have half a mind and only see half a person.
And I also think that what's interesting are some of the images, this idea of half-caste human being, casting half a shadow and dreaming half a dream. You know, they're really quite thought-provoking ideas. So after making fun in the second stanza, you know, there is the definite serious,
yeah, the tone switches.
Actually.
Yeah, the tone switches completely from humour into, actually I'm getting a little annoyed now. You know, you're saying that because of my background, my heritage, that I'm less a person. No, it doesn't mean that I only see with half an eye. It doesn't mean that I only dream half a dream. It's you that's limited, not me.
Exactly.
As he finishes, he tells in the last stanza, and I will tell you the other half of my story. It's saying, yeah, once you develop a full mind instead of half of one, then maybe you and I can get together and learn more about each other. The other thing about Half-Caste that I really, really like is the fact that it's an oral poem. It's a performance poem. If you sit and read it, the impact doesn't get you.
No.
If you sit and listen to it, or if you're fortunate enough to go on maybe YouTube and see John Agard perform it himself, you get the whole drift of what he's trying to get to you, what he's trying to make us understand. When he says what you mean, he actually you feel like he's talking directly to you.
And with his intonation in his reading, you know, it really lends the poem quite a hypnotic rhythm almost, you know, really driving his point home. And then that's reflected in perhaps the changes in tone between the second and sort of third stanzas, which are obviously much longer, the way he becomes perhaps more reflective in the third stanza instead of, you know, the humour that he's introducing into the second stanza.
Yeah, and towards the end of that third stanza as well, he's changed his address towards the reader. He's saying, what do you mean when you call me Half-Caste? And then at the end he's saying, no, it's you that needs to change. You need to look at yourself and see what needs addressing. I
mean, in similar ways to unrelated incidences, obviously, in oral poems, something to be read aloud. What else do we find in this poem that sort of lends itself to that spoken language as opposed to written?
There's the I dialect again. I'm just trying to find an example of it. Well, you mentioned one earlier, where's it gone? Line 22, RS.
And in fact, summer dem cloud.
Yeah.
Half-Caste till dem overcast. You know, very much his accent.
You, which is continuously repeated throughout the poem. The you is why you.
I mean, the repetition is very interesting. I mean, he does demand that explain yourself 3 times in that second stanza, and then it introduces the third stanza with that explain yourself. You know, that you know, command, that imperative, explain what you mean. So it's our responsibility, and the repetition makes us realise that it's our responsibility to explain why we're so prejudiced.
Absolutely.
And then we've also got the sort of the slashes, the obliques, instead of the full stops, which is, you know, again, bringing to mind the spoken language. Yeah.
So it flows a lot easier because it is an oral poem. When you're reading it, it runs it smoothly, and you get full impact of what Agard is trying to get across to us.
And I think you get that with the repetition as well. So from line 41, I close half an eye. 43, I dream half a dream. 45, I half-caste. That rhythm, again, that reinforcing that message through the repetition of those words.
Yeah, and he's using it, if you look at the language, sorry, I'm going back to language and all the other structure, but if you look at the language as well, he uses a mix between what is considered European language and this kind of Caribbean style language, with the half-caste being the link between the two, you know, which I thought, it's very, very interesting what you can see in this one poem.
So, in terms of personal response to Half-Caste, how do you respond to the poem?
I love this poem. I think it's great. I love the way to start with, it's a bit of humour, it's a bit of fun. It's because it's an oral poem, it's performed, so you can get into it a bit like music. And then he switches on you, and it's like, no, you explain yourself. I want you to explain to me why you use this term. I think that the whole structure of it, the language that he uses, it sticks in your mind. He makes a point, and it keeps ringing through. My bottom set year 11, who are fabulous, this is the one poem that's really stuck with them. That
I think it is.
Quote.
I would agree. It is probably the most memorable poem in the collection. It's the one that instantly, because of his performance and because of the way it's written, you know, lots of people really do respond positively to it. I mean, in terms of the message, I agree with what you're saying about the language and the performance and the enjoyability of it. But personally, I sometimes have a bit of an issue with his message and what he's saying, because he seems to be making the point that it doesn't matter what colour I am, but don't call me half-caste because. And I'm mixed race, and I sort of feel, well, in my experiences of growing up, I've come to this sort of realisation that actually, it doesn't matter what other people call you, it's about how you see yourself and you being comfortable with yourself. So for me, sometimes I feel, well, maybe he's kind of belabouring the point a little bit, and that I personally don't care what people call me. You know, I am what I am, and what I am needs no excuses. So, you know, you just got to kind of move beyond what other people say to you in the sense that this room, she's got that confidence and she's got that self-realisation. So it doesn't matter to her. She breaks free. And likewise in sort of Searching My Tongue, that she finds some comfort, the balance. Yeah. And I think from that point of view, I perhaps enjoy those poems more and respond more to those messages than perhaps John Agard.
Yeah, and I agree, and I can, well, to a certain degree, I can see where you're coming from. I can sympathise rather than empathise. However, I think that he does have a valid point, because people do make an issue with language. And unfortunately, there is racism. And until that's dead and buried once and for all, issues like this are going to occur. And he's addressed it directly. He's made us sit up and look and listen and say, why do you use this term? What is it about me that makes you think that I'm only half a person?